Hi, I'm James Taylor, business creativity and innovation keynote speaker, and this is The Creative Life, a show dedicated to you, the creative. If you're looking for motivation, inspiration, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's an author, musician, entrepreneur, performer, designer, or thought leader. They'll share with you their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, and much, much more. You'll find show notes for this episode as well as free training on creativity over at jamestaylor.me. Enjoy this episode. Hi, it's James Taylor here. Today's episode was first aired as part of International Authors Summit. This inspiring virtual summit reveals the secrets of making, marketing, and monetizing a best-selling book. If you would like to access the full video version as well as in-depth sessions with over 40 best-selling authors, then I've got a very special offer for you. Just go to internationalauthorssummit.com where you'll be able to register for a free pass for the summit. Yeah, that's right. Over 40 New York Times and Amazon best-selling authors, book editors, agents, and publishers sharing their insights, strategies, and tactics on how to write and market your first or next bestseller. So just go to internationalauthorssummit.com, but not before you listen to today's episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted to welcome Nina Amir. Nina is an Amazon best-selling author of works including How to Blog a Book, the Author Training Manual, and Creative Visualization for Writers. She is known as the Inspiration to Creation Coach because she helps writers, bloggers, and other creative people combine their passion and purpose so they become high performers and achieve more inspired results. It's my great pleasure to have Nina with us today. So welcome, Nina.
Oh, thank you so much, James. It's my honor, and I'm really excited.
So share with everyone what's happening in your world just now.
Just now, well, I'm working on a new book and working with a bunch of writers who are wanting to author change. And so I'm just excited to be making a positive and meaningful difference and helping writers.
So take us back. How did you get into this world of working with authors and bloggers and helping them really become prolific? Because that's the thing that you're really known for.
Yes. So, in high school, I thought I wanted to be a novelist. Loved reading novels, and went to my mother and said, I think this is what I want to do for a living. I'm going to be a novelist. And she was very practical and said to me, unless you're a really great writer, you're not going to make a living as a novelist. So I took that to mean maybe I wasn't that good a writer when she was just being practical. But what that did was it sent me down the path to journalism. And I took a course in magazine journalism, and I ended up going to school and getting a degree in magazine journalism. And that put me in the world of publishing, right? So different type of publishing than books, but still publishing. And I had a professor who told me that if I could write a magazine article, I could write a book, because a nonfiction book was just a series of articles all on the same topic. So I thought, okay, I can do that. So then I was approached by someone. Well, I went to work. I was editing magazines and writing for magazines, and that was my full-time gig. And somebody asked me if I could edit a book for them. And it was a nonfiction book. And I remembered what my professor said. And I thought, well, I've been editing magazines. I can write magazine articles. Why couldn't I edit a nonfiction book? And I did. And so I had a couple books I edited that were quite successful, and kept doing a little bit of editing, kept writing, started blogging, all these things, and then suddenly thought, why don't I write a book? I have all these ideas. Maybe I should write a book. And that set me on a path to learn how to succeed as an author. And I got involved with the San Francisco Writers Conference and just kept doing everything I could to learn how I could succeed. But I started sharing that on my blog, and later created something kind of like NaNoWriMo, but for nonfiction writers to write a book in 30 days. And it just kind of snowballed, James, into me knowing a lot about how to get published. But underlying all of that was also this desire to write books that were spiritual and related to personal growth and personal development. And so, as you know, I'm a high performance coach as well. And so that's now been woven in to the work I do with writers. It's sort of a little bit of a spiritual flair, but more than that, really, how do I get writers out of their own way? And so that's really how I got where I am now.
Now, there's the Artist's Way, the Julia Cameron book. She talks about this idea of shadow artists, that people they kind of they're holding back, they kind of get involved in the industry in one way or the other. Like let's say if a painter, they become an art dealer, for example, or a musician. Instead of becoming a musician, they become a sound engineer. Or they kind of get involved in the industry, but they kind of sit back. And often it's a lot of people just kind of stay in that place. But that journey then to actually going, I think there's a movie called 20 Feet from Stardom, going to the front of the stage, that 20 feet is one of the most difficult. So tell us that journey that you went through from being an editor. So you were already writing, obviously, all the time in journalism. You were then starting to edit people's books. You were getting really well known and getting good at that. But that journey to becoming a published author in your own right in that type of way, what was going on in your mind, the psychology of that at that stage?
At first I approached it with a whole lot of confidence, feeling like, okay, I have an idea and I'm just going to go forth and do this, right? And I very quickly had a setback because I sent out my first book proposal and I was really set on having a big-time agent in New York, right? And going with a big publishing house and all those dreams we all have, right? And I got a call from a New York literary agent right away who said, I love your book. I like the title. I like the writing's awesome. You did an awesome proposal. Everything's great. And then came that big word, but. But you don't have a platform. And I'm sure you have lots of people talking about platform, but in those days, this was a new term. And so she explained, nobody knows who you are, so you better just go to a small publishing house in the meantime. And that, to make a very long story short, while I had some conversations with publishers and things, I didn't get published. And I then had a sequence of literary agents as well and didn't get published. And so I realized that this was much harder than it looked. At least from a traditional publishing standpoint, there were a lot of requirements that went beyond writing well. And I knew I could write, and I knew my ideas were good. And so I had to then fight with my own demons about, do I really want to build platform? I worked for about 8 years on building platform and trying to get published and really thought I would quit. I was like, this is just too hard. I worked all this time, still no deal. And I had to get to the point where I said, I refuse. I refuse to quit. I know that I have something to offer, and I will just embrace everything it takes to achieve the goal of getting a book out there that will impact people in a positive way. And when I changed my mindset to one of, I will embrace it all because it all gets me where I want to go. 4 years later, in half the time, I held my first book in my hands, my first traditionally published book. So I really had to get out of my own way and say, I'm not doing this because I have to do it. Like, I'm not building platform or blogging because I have to do it. I'm doing it because it gets me where I want to go. And that was a big change in mindset, as well as just getting back to a place of confidence of, okay, so just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And I have to just keep telling myself that I have something important to say, and I'm going to say it.
And you'd been obviously in that world of journalism, so you weren't kind of going into it like a babe in the wood, where you just kind of you didn't know what was happening in terms of the publishing. You obviously you came from publishing, albeit there was a slightly different, obviously, with journalism and more kind of traditional kind of book style publishing. But you knew a lot about that industry, and even then, for you kind of took that initial knock there on your confidence. You kind of had to start kind of rebuilding. Were there any mentors or guides? This is the thing that you kind of do today. You can act as that guide for those writers that are going on that journey. Did you have someone when you were going on that journey?
Well, I had, as I said, I was involved with the San Francisco Writers Conference, and actually via that conference, I was mentored a fair amount by the man who started that conference, Michael Larson. Some people may know him. He has a bunch of books out there, how to write a book proposal, how to find an agent, or something like that. Anyway, He mentored me quite a bit and kept encouraging me. And a lot of my education in the book publishing world came from that conference. And I met people who I later, for many years, for 30 days in November, I had blog posts that were primarily guest posts from people. And so I would ask them to write about topics I wanted to learn about. So I had mentors from a lot of areas because I was actually reaching out and saying, will you write about this, and so I can learn and so my audience can learn. But I would say that the San Francisco Writers Conference was huge for me, and that was where I made the contacts with people, and I learned. I mean, I met people like the late Dan Poynter and was able to have conversations with him, and so that's I really recommend that to people to yes, find a mentor and go where you can learn and get supported, because that's where you're going to stay inspired. And when we get discouraged, we lack inspiration, and we want to stay inspired.
And I think that the writing obviously is quite a solitary activity for a lot of it. So having that sense of being part of a community of other people that are just as crazy as you about doing this thing that they love is quite affirming as well. Especially if you there's people in there that have more experience, a little bit further along the road, that they can act as that guide. So you kind of act as that role now. You are and we're going to get into the kind of the work that you do really as a writing coach and a mentor. You talk in your work about high performance and about being productive and prolific as a writer. So tell me, why is that important? I mean, we think of like Harper Lee, for example, who was not prolific in that sense. But why is being a productive and prolific author important today in the environment that we're in?
So today, there are a lot of books out there, right? Lots of people trying to get noticed. And if you're not producing work on a regular basis, you're going to fall by the wayside. And I can tell you in my own experience, so the last 2 years, I haven't published as much. I haven't had a new traditionally published book come out. And I can watch as my book sales and all drop. Okay, so it's really important to stay in front of your audience on a regular basis. And there are lots of ways to do that. For instance, blogging. You can do that. Social media. But a productive writer is somebody who sits down every day and writes, or 5 days a week, or whatever it is, and actually produces work. Right? Not somebody who's dabbling. It's somebody who actually is producing work, which then they can publish. So to me, productivity is sitting down on a regular basis and producing something usable. That doesn't mean it doesn't need to be edited or revised, but something usable. We have a goal in mind and we're moving towards it in a consistent fashion. And prolific, to me, is not just producing a lot of work, but actually getting it in the hands of your readers. So you want to be producing something that can be published, and you are publishing and getting it out there. And when you're doing that on a regular basis, you're going to build platform no matter what. You're going to have more and more readers who want to follow you, right, and want to read your work. And so they'll read one book, and they'll go to your Amazon page or whatever, and they'll see that you have 10 other books, and they're going to begin to buy those books too. And so, we call this the long tail effect, right? So, you could have one book that hits after, maybe it's your 15th book, but because it generates a bigger audience or more visibility, people begin to buy the other books too. And so all your book sales will increase. So to me, even if you're putting ebooks in between, short ebooks in between longer ebooks or printed books, whether you're self-publishing or traditionally publishing, the more prolific you are, the higher likelihood of you succeeding.
And there's something obviously there in the psychology of it. People like your voice. There's something about your voice, your view of the world, that they want to find out more. But I also guess that the way the algorithms work on things like Amazon, for example, if you enjoyed this, then you'll enjoy this, and that's going to able people to go deeper into your catalog.
Yes, but I'm going to go back to that. Is all true, but I'm going to go back to the psychology of it. When you don't write consistently, you lose steam, right? You become disconnected from your work, and over time, you get discouraged and frustrated. You lose your confidence in your ability to write consistently. I mean, think about it. Writers write. However, the majority of writers talk about writing and don't write.
There's that expression, I think it was Austin Kleon that said, a lot of people want to be the noun without doing the verb.
Exactly right. Yeah, they want to be a writer, but they're not writing. So the thing is that the more that happens, the more you're stuck there, because it just becomes more discouraging, more frustrating. You get negative self-talk going on. What were you thinking? You said you were going to write. You didn't write. You're so stupid. You never follow through on everything, on anything. And it's a downward spiral from there. But when you begin to write on a consistent basis, suddenly you're a writer. I had a client. She came to me. I told her, I said, write for 15 minutes a day. That's all. Just 15 minutes a day. And she came back like 2 weeks later and said, well, I didn't just write 15 minutes, of course. I wrote 30 minutes and then I wrote 45. And guess what? I suddenly see myself as a writer. And her confidence level went way up. And she became very consistent because she could see how it was building. And so I think that's the other issue about being productive and prolific, is that when we are that, it allows us to be more so.
It's like when someone changes their self-images. I've seen people, friends of mine, who have got really into running or cycling, and it's almost like part of their identity. I'm a runner. I'm a cyclist. They really inhabit that word because they're making a consistent ritual or process.
Yes, exactly right. And I can tell you from my own experience, I do way more than write. I mean, I blog consistently, of course, and so I'm always writing, and I'm always writing promotional emails and, all that kind of thing. I'm not always working on a book, or in the last few years, I wasn't. So I'd be writing a book when I had a book to write. And I was very involved in all the promotion of my courses and my membership sites and coaching and all of these things. And this year I said to myself, what happened to Nina the writer? Like the person who that was the primary thing she did. And it's very easy to just let other things get in the way and lose that identity. And we really have to cultivate that identity, which is happening, up here, but also in the world. It's the action of writing that makes us the writer. And then we believe it. You mentioned that. I was just going to say, there was a teacher I had on the metaphysical level. He taught metaphysics, and he once said that you really had to make an affirmation of action. So we talk a lot about affirmations and self-talk, but until you do it, until you make an affirmation of action over and over and over again, repeating it just like an affirmation you would tell yourself, it's not till you do that the brain gets it, that this is who you are and what you do. You
mentioned talking about productivity there. I'm going to take you to one of the other P's I know you speak about a lot. You speak a number of P's we're going to be covering, but one of them is purpose. The purpose of why you're writing, the purpose of what this particular thing is that you're writing just now, what the purpose of that is. When you go into, especially as a non-fiction writer, do you have to get really clear at the start what your purpose is for writing, or is this something that you just gradually evolve, you discover as you just kind of do the ritual of writing?
So there are a lot of people who think that purpose is going to be something that just, either they should know or they have to find it, or it's going to drop on their head and suddenly they'll understand what they're meant to do in this lifetime. There are people who do know that. This is what I'm meant to do in this lifetime. There are other people who can choose it. If you don't know your purpose, you can choose one. You can say, okay, I want to write a book that will help eliminate school shootings, right? It could be anything, but you can choose that is my purpose. It's meaningful to me, and this is what I want to do. Is it going to be your life's purpose? Maybe, maybe not. But I think we can choose a purpose. Is it important for a writer to have a purpose? Yes. Because I think when you have a purpose, you can then go from that idea of this is my intention, this is what I want to do, this is the impact I want to have, to an actual mission. Mission being the goal that comes out of that purpose, right? So I want to eliminate the number of kids affected by school shootings, and my mission is to write a book and to do other actions in the world that will reduce school shootings by 50% in the next 5 years, so that 50% less children are affected, right? So now we have a mission, and our book is going to align with that mission. It's going to be one aspect of accomplishing it. So, we're talking about nonfiction here. So, there are lots of types of nonfiction. There's activism type books like that. There could be just a book on, trying to, a self-help book or spiritual book where we're, trying to impact one person. But still, we have to know why we're doing that. Our purpose really comes out of our big why. Why am I doing it? Why is it meaningful to me? What's my emotional connection to this? And then there's the mission, which is bigger. Okay, so that's what I want to accomplish, and how am I going to do it? Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've spoken there about this idea of purpose. We've spoken about the almost like the psychology, and you explain some of the things that you've reflected on, things that when you work with clients that that they come to you with as well. There's some of the kind of almost like a bit like the productivity piece. Like again, it goes on from there as well. You mentioned like just that very simple one of the 15 minutes, just being sitting down there 15 minutes, kind of writing that. For those people who are just struggling, maybe not necessarily to write, but to finish a piece. Let's say if they're working on a book and they're like, okay, I get into this thing, and then I'm suddenly this bright shiny thing is over there, and then I'm going to go over that thing, and this other bright shiny thing is over. What advice do you give in terms of that? I guess it links to the productivity and the being prolific as well. How to stay on track with your writing to be able to complete things.
Right, and this is going to go back to the P of purpose as well, because really, when you understand your purpose, you are going to fairly naturally figure out who you're writing for. So, we always hear write for your audience, right? You really have to get clear on that. Who is going to be impacted the most by my book? And when somebody isn't writing or they're not completing, I always go back to this, because when you can get a picture of the person who's going to be impacted the most by your book, you can begin to think through, and this is how I would advise somebody, is think through to this person, right? What is your goal for them with your book? What is it that you want to accomplish for them, right? How do you want to impact them? And then you can say, well, if I don't write my book, how will they remain struggling? Like, what are their pain points? And if I don't give them a book that eases that pain, what will happen? And that begins to generate some necessity, right? The feeling of necessity. I better get this book out because there are people struggling and suffering, and it's my job to alleviate that. So as an example, I had a writer who he'd been writing, but he wasn't finishing. And he would start and he would stop, and life would get in the way, which is what typically, I hear all the time. Life got in the way, so I didn't write this week. And I asked him, I said, who are you writing for? And he was writing a book for fathers about parenting. And I said, okay, so the fathers will be impacted by your book? And he said, yes. I said, okay, and who else will be impacted? And he thought for a moment, and then he said, the children. Ultimately, the children will be impacted because they will have fathers who do a better job of parenting them. And I said, okay, so how long do you want to let those kids wait to have better fathers? Because every day that goes by, they might have fathers who are not parenting them as well as they could. Well, that was the fire under his butt, right? Because now suddenly he had necessity, and he also had urgency, right? Yeah. There was a need for his book. He knew that already, but now he really could see who would be impacted by this book. And if he didn't write it, they were going to suffer. And so now there was an urgency to get it done. So that's usually where I go with this. If you're not writing or you're not finishing, create some urgency and some necessity by really getting in touch with who you're writing for and how you are letting them down.
I love that, because also it can work to to that part of a lot of people's minds of you're more alert to the negative consequences of something than the positive consequences. although sometimes you would love it to be different, but sometimes that is just the way that the mind works, is looking for threats and whatnot. And so you're kind of using that part of the brain that's just trying to go down that way and kind of harnessing it for some good there. What about we talk about the physiology? I know this is one of the other things you work with people on as well, and just managing energy levels, for example. This is we're in a kind of marathon, I guess, as writers. What advice would you give in terms of, we think about a lot of stuff we do out, like I'm sitting. I'm maybe sitting here for long periods of time. So there's that part of the physiology. There's my just general energy levels, mental energy, physical energy. What advice do you give around this area?
Yeah, so this is something that is rarely talked about in writing and publishing circles. And it's enormously important for us to not only master our psychology, but to master our physiology, right? So yeah, if you have different kinds of energy that you bring to your computer every day. You have emotional energy. You could be sad, you could be happy, you could feel great, emotionally, or you could feel really lousy emotionally. You have mental energy. Are you clear and focused, or are you distracted, right? And then you have actual physical energy. Do you feel tired, or do you feel, energized and ready to go? If you show up at the desk with low energy and any, mental, physical, emotional energy that's low, you're going to have a hard time being productive. You really are. You're going to just struggle. You're going to be sitting there going, flipping over to Facebook. You're going to be looking for another cup of coffee. You're going to do all kinds of things but write. And if you do write, it's going to be very slow and laborious. If, however, you come to the desk with high energy, emotional, physical, and mental energy that is high, you're going to be way more productive. So what does that mean you have to do? You have to judge whether your emotional energy is where it needs to be. So if you're worried about something or you're sad or whatever, you're going to need to do something to shift that. The best way to shift that is to focus on something positive or to move your body, because we know that when we exercise, we release endorphins and all those things that make us feel better, right? So we don't want to focus on what's making us feel badly, and we want to move our body so that we feel better, right? Also, when you move your body, you're going to raise your physical energy. Now, do you have to go out for a run? No. You could actually do breathing, right? Do very deep, forceful breathing for 30 seconds, and you're going to energize your body and your brain, because your brain needs oxygen. And we tend to sit at that desk and not breathe. You could drink some water, which is also going to get your brain functioning better, right? So, and then as you do something like breathing, you actually focus your mind. So as you do, you could go do some yoga moves. It doesn't matter. But do something where you get your breath moving and your body moving, and that physical energy is going to focus your brain and also give you the energy to work. Most people will say, I'm writing after work and I'm tired, and so I don't do it. You can actually do breathing exercises and regenerate yourself so that you have the energy. So we have to show up at the desk, at the computer, with good energy in general if we want to be productive.
And those exercises, whether it's breathing or yoga or just going out for a walk, I guess it also brings you back into your body when your maybe mind has been in other places, and it brings you back to being present, rather than looking back or think, I've got all these things to do in the future and I've got to get that done. So it brings you into that place, that more present place, when you can go into your own world, and you can really kind of plunge those depths of your creative potential, which is difficult when you've got Facebook pings and various things kind of going off all the time. I know we're gonna. There's a couple of kind of final questions I would love to know from you. Are there any tools or we're actually talking about Facebook actually there, but are there any tools or apps that you find actually can be useful for writers? And bearing in mind all tools have their pluses and minuses, but are there any ones that you find, online tools or apps or things to help the writing process, make it just a bit more enjoyable or a bit easier, or maybe even in the researching process?
Yeah, I like Focus at Will. So there's a small fee to it, but Focus at Will gives you the ability to choose the type of music you like, that is actually, it trains the brain to be more focused. And so you get more done because your brain waves are syncing up and it's helping you focus. It also will track your productivity for you. So it'll ask you, how productive were you during this period? So I like to set it for 50 minutes because in high performance, we know that at about 50 minutes, our productivity drops because we kind of get burned out a little bit. And so we need to rejuvenate a bit. So at 50 minutes, I like to stop, move my body a little bit, get a drink of water, do some breathing, and then start again. A lot of people think that you're going to get out of the flow. You won't get out of the flow. You're actually going to come back refreshed and ready to keep going. So Focus at Will is one of my favorites. And if you don't want to pay for it, you can always use Spotify, and it has a focus station that you can go to. And it's the same idea.
I love that. I use Focus at Will as well. And also you mentioned the 50-minute funny. I have the same thing I have on my watch. It buzzes me every 50 minutes just to remind me to get off my butt and move a little bit to kind of get that kind of get the energy. What about if you, and we're going to be talking about we're going to have some links to your books here as well, but if you were to recommend a book by another author, it could be on the craft of writing or the mindset or even the marketing side of writing, what would that book be?
I can't think of one on the mindset of writing. I usually recommend Brendan Burchard's High Performance Habits, just because I actually think the problem is not in learning to write or to, I just think the problem lies in our personal development. And so when you can learn the habits of high performers, you're going to become more productive. And even if you're learning the craft of writing, it's the same idea. You really need to become a high performer so that you master the skills, and then you'll master the writing, right? And move through, you'll be clearer. So you'll have clarity. You're going to have more energy. You're going to be more courageous and bold about your writing. You're going to be more productive. And you're also going to be more of an influencer because you're going to put all that together and have more self-confidence, and you're going to be out there telling stories and sharing your work, and people are going to start to listen to you. So I just think that would be the best book I could recommend, is High Performance Habits.
And obviously Brendan really lives that as well. He's a great example of someone that is very prolific in his production, not just of books, but online courses and lots of other things as well. I'd love to know, if we imagine someone like yourself that is around today, who is maybe a journalist or the blogger, they're kind of that cub reporter working somewhere, or they're doing writing, but they really want to be an author and write their kind of non-fiction works, write those books, but they have no contacts, no one knows who they are. What advice would you give them at this stage, knowing all that you know both about the craft and about obviously the business side of writing? What advice would you give them today in terms of getting starting, making that journey?
Well, one is to get involved with something like a conference, to just get an education, or get involved with they're not just me, but there are other people who have membership sites and things like that for nonfiction writers. So join something where you're with other people. So a little plug, I have the Nonfiction Writers University. So something like that, go there or to a conference, or there are other organizations. The other thing I would say, which is more tactical, is I would say blog. Because to me, the blog is the foundation of your platform building. So if you want to get out there and get known, which is I think what you're asking, how do we actually get started and get out there? You need to begin to develop a body of work and practice your craft and develop voice. And the blog is an awesome place to do that. And as a nonfiction writer, to become an authority on your topic. And once you have a blog post, you can share it on social media. People are always saying, well, what do I share on social media? You share your blog posts, share your expertise with people, and that will go a long, long way. And I can tell you that I wasn't an expert on blogging books until I started a blog called How to Blog a Book. And 5 months later, I had #1 Google status, when you do a search, and people were contacting me, to speak and to appear and all of that. And that's how I got the book deal. So I think that you need to establish yourself as an expert or authority if you're a nonfiction writer, and a blog is an awesome way to do it. And plus, you're going to impact way more people from your blog than you likely will with a book, even though I encourage everyone to write a book because it's great way to have impact and to be an authority, an expert. But I get more comments daily from my blog posts than I do from the books I sell. And, in the world of publishing today, the average book sells only 250 copies per year. So a blog, you could have 250 readers a month or more and be impacting a whole lot of people and developing a platform and creating the foundation for your publishing career.
Fantastic. Now, we're going to have a link here as well. You have a really cool productivity quiz for writers, and we're going to have a link here so people can go on that. So obviously a quiz that was identifying some of those things that we've been speaking about today in this conversation. We're going to have a link here below. People can click on that, go through to that productivity quiz. If people want to learn about, you mentioned your membership, I know you have other products and programs as well. Where's the best place for them to go and learn about that? And we'll also have a link to that here as well.
Yeah, they can just go to ninaamir.com. So NINAAMIR.com. Everything is there. They can click through and around and they'll find it. The other place they might want to go, James, is to my blog that is specifically for nonfiction writers, and it is called WriteNonfictionNow.com.
Fantastic. We're going to have all those links here as well, so people can kind of go check out that quiz, check out the programs and products you have as well, and also that blog, and get some ideas, get your creative juices going. Nina, thank you so much for coming on today, sharing a little bit about your own personal journey and giving some great advice for any of those people that are on their writing journey as well. And I wish you all the best with your next book that you're going to be working on.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. It was an honor, as I said, and good luck.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.